King Jehoshaphat of Judah reigned from Jerusalem for 25 years. He was a stable, orthodox monarch, significant for his longevity and relative godliness. Yet the primary sources documenting his reign, the books of 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, allocate drastically different amounts of space to this same man. This heat map compares his textual presence in the two records. 1 Kings grants him a tiny sliver of text in chapters 15 and 22. 2 Chronicles, however, dedicates massive blocks of text to him across chapters 17 through 20. This discrepancy goes deeper. The most famous figures of the era, prophets Elijah and Elisha, vanish from the record. The massive Chronicles block filters out their entire ministry. This raises a problem of methodology. We have to ask why the author of Kings would nearly ignore a successful 25-year reign. These records function as highly selective, intentional arguments, rather than flat, redundant diaries. To see the true depth of this period, we must employ stereoscopic history, viewing these two texts as distinct, overlapping lenses. Historians of the ancient Near East designed theological architectures to interpret the causality of events, prioritizing meaning over simple modern chronology. The Book of Kings tracks the Northern Kingdom's prophetic conflict. It evaluates the past based on a king's fidelity to Yahweh against state-sponsored idolatry. The Book of Chronicles focuses on the South. It provides an architectural history of Judah, prioritizing the Davidic dynasty and the Temple. The reigns of Jehoshaphat and his son Jehoram provide the specific context needed to see how this system works in practice. Misidentifying these underlying editorial lenses leads to an inaccurate, shallow understanding of biblical history. In the Book of Kings, the author identifies the true priority of the 9th century BC by focusing on the Northern Kingdom. In the north, the Omri dynasty created a geopolitical and spiritual crisis. Under King Ahab, the state began the aggressive importation of Baal worship. The response to this crisis was a real-time war waged by the prophets Elijah and Elisha against the throne's idolatry. For the author of Kings, this theological conflict is the central causal engine driving the era. Even major military engagements, like the battle at Ramoth-Gilead, are framed as staging grounds for this prophetic conflict rather than pure military history. This explains the Jehoshaphat anomaly. A peaceful southern king is peripheral to the main northern conflict, so the author of Kings mathematically minimizes him. Under this northern lens, geopolitical stability is irrelevant compared to the spiritual war against Baal. The chronicler operates through a different lens entirely. This narrative isolates the history of Judah, prioritizing the survival of the Davidic line and the temple institutions in the south. The northern prophets Elijah and Elisha are almost entirely absent here. The chronicler mentions Elijah only once. This methodology treats the northern kingdom as dead air, documenting it only when it structurally impacts or threatens the south. Because Jehoshaphat remained true to the Lord and supported the institutions of Judah for 25 years, he stands as a massive pillar in this narrative. Chronicles tracks the survival of a promised bloodline through a chaotic world. These two isolated narratives collide at a critical intersection: Jehoshaphat's political compromise. Jehoshaphat moved beyond peaceful relations to form a close alliance with Ahab in the north. This alliance was sealed by marriage. Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, married Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab. The idolatry of the Ahab administration legally crossed the border into Jerusalem. The prophet Jehu, the seer, explicitly rebuked Jehoshaphat for this, asking why he would help those who hate the Lord. At this specific moment, the chronicler's focus suddenly shifts toward the northern kingdom. This diplomatic marriage was an existential contagion that threatened the survival of the Davidic line. We can track the immediate results of this alliance once Jehoshaphat dies and Jehoram takes the throne at age 32. Jehoram's first act was the execution of all 6 of his brothers to secure absolute power. This mass execution imported northern-style ruthless dynastic politics, actively dismantling the South's stability. A weakened state followed. Even the Edomites and the city of Libnah successfully revolted against Judah's control. Jehoram's end was ignoble. Chronicles records him dying of a divinely sent, incurable disease after an 8-year reign, passing away to no one's regret. The long-term consequence was nearly fatal. Athaliah eventually attempted to wipe out the entire house of David, saving only the infant Joash. The northern influence caused a cascading systemic failure that nearly liquidated the southern royal bloodline. In 841 BC, the tension between these two kingdoms reached a breaking point. In the north, a prophet anointed Jehu to violently wipe out the house of Ahab and destroy the worship of Baal. The Northern Revolution severed the Southern alliance on impact. Jehu killed Joram, the king of Israel, and immediately chased down and killed Ahaziah, the visiting king of Judah. Archaeological evidence survives in the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, anchoring Jehu's historical prominence. Remarkably, on this relief showing Jehu bowing to pay tribute, Assyrian records still call him the son of Omri, highlighting Omri's lasting reputation despite Jehu wiping out his descendants. The events of 841 BC served as a synchronized reset, eradicating the compromised leadership in both the north and the south on the same day. The author of Kings and the chronicler each process the violence of 841 BC through their distinct lenses. For the Book of Kings, Jehu's coup is the fulfillment of prophetic judgment against Ahab's Baal worship. For Chronicles, the coup is a traumatic, necessary purging of Ahab's influence to save the Davidic covenant. The discrepancy in Jehoshaphat's textual footprint is the logical result of these two competing priorities. Viewing these historical books as flat, competing chronologies is a modern error. Identifying their stereoscopic lenses is the only way to understand the complex theology of ancient history.